It was never about peace. Not really. They came to us with open arms and false smiles, preaching unity and technological uplift, promising a place in their so-called galactic accord. 1,000 alien races, hive minds, silicon-based thinkers, telepaths, parasites with voices like broken glass, all under one flag. They told Earth we were late to the party, that our species had potential if we were willing to evolve past our primitive aggression. They used that word a lot. Primitive. But aggression was the only reason Earth survived. I remember the day they first tried to disable our fleet. I was stationed aboard the Helion, one of the 5 dreadnoughts orbiting Europa. We'd picked up distortion waves, then dead silence. That kind of silence that comes just before something cosmic hits you in the face. They appeared like ghosts, 8 cruisers from the Trelv Consortium, broadcasting peace signals while charging up energy siphons. They thought we wouldn't notice. They thought we'd submit like the last dozen planets they liberated. We didn't. Captain Granger gave the order without blinking. No warning shots, no comms. He knew the rule. Everyone on that ship knew it. If they tamper with Earth's fleet, they've chosen extinction. We turned the Helion's railguns toward the lead cruiser and punched a hole straight through its reactor core. By the time their translation AI tried to scream misunderstanding, they were already slag. And that was just the beginning. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Accord officially labeled us a rogue species. Our trade agreements were voided. Our diplomats were expelled. Half our colonies lost contact overnight. Power grids drained, atmospheric scrubbers shut off remotely. Billions died. No war declarations, just silence and death. And that's when Earth made the decision that changed everything. We blacked out. Every orbital platform, every dreadnought, every station from Mars to Titan, severed from the galactic network, running cold, blind, and isolated. They called it suicidal. They didn't realize that Earth had prepared for this since first contact. The AI protocols were purged. Auto-reliance was stripped down. Everything was hardened, humanized. We trained people to fly blind, fight with grit, and bleed if they had to. That's when the nightmares started for them. You see, the Galactic Accord had grown used to control. Psychological pressure, economic strangulation, slow compliance, it worked on 99% of civilizations. But not on Earth. We were too chaotic, too angry, too damn stubborn. So they came for us directly. The fleet started arriving at the edges of the solar system, scouts first, probes, then gunships with stun-beam tech designed to pacify developing species. What they didn't realize was that Earth had its own rulebook, and it was written in blood. When the Accord's Vanguard ship, a floating cathedral of biometal, tried to seize Mars' orbital dockyards, the Ravager protocol was triggered. The dockyards detonated, vaporizing over 80,000 human workers who'd volunteered to stay behind. A human cost we already accepted. The blast took out the entire alien fleet. That message was clear. We'd rather burn ourselves than kneel. I was reassigned to Ares 9, a stealth cruiser built in the underground forges of Antarctica. No official records, no friendly transponders. Our mission was surgical. Hit their supply chains, sabotage relay beacons, and make them feel fear. Our squad had one motto, stenciled in old war-gray paint inside every corridor. They touched the fleet. They chose extinction. They laughed at first. The other races, I mean. To them, humans were just noise, fire ants at a picnic. Then we started winning. Our kill ratios were absurd. 1 ship for 30. We used chaos, misdirection, and dirty tricks. We jammed their telepaths with white noise, weaponized virus strains they couldn't cure, even used their own AI frameworks against them. And then we went further. We found one of their ark worlds, over 4 billion members of the Kireth species. They'd been stockpiling resources for the war, thought we wouldn't dare hit a civilian core. We did. 4 stealth drones laced with singularity cores. The entire planet folded into itself in seconds. They didn't call us primitive after that. They called us monsters. They stopped sending diplomats after that. The Kireth genocide changed everything. No more negotiations, no more human potential lectures. The Galactic Accord labeled Earth as Class Z hostile. That's their polite way of saying shoot on sight. Funny thing is, it didn't change a damn thing on our end. We were already committed, already buried too deep in the dirt to climb out clean. And maybe that's what made us dangerous. The rest of the galaxy fought wars to win. We fought to make sure they remembered why they should have never come close in the first place. I was in the medbay of Ares 9 when the news of the Kireth broke. Half the crew watched the grainy surveillance footage on a private loop for days. Pixelated footage of a planet folding in on itself. Screams echoing through whatever atmosphere was left as black holes devoured everything. I couldn't watch it. Not because of guilt, because it didn't feel like enough. You have to understand something about us, the ones who survived those first waves. We weren't soldiers anymore, not really. We were butchers with purpose. Men who'd seen friends burned alive by synthetic nerve agents, who'd watched human babies freeze to death on Luna when oxygen supplies were cut off by Accord tech. Men who'd buried their wives in orbital ash and didn't get the time to mourn. So we didn't fight fair. I'll never forget the look in Reyes's eyes. He was our comms guy, ex-Marine. The moment we intercepted the Accord's prison transport convoy near Saturn. 3 massive haulers filled with political detainees and genetic inferiors, humans who didn't pass their enhancement compatibility tests. The aliens didn't even consider them prisoners. They called them organic waste. Reyes didn't say a word. He just locked eyes with me, hit the jamming button, and nodded toward the weapons bay. We tore that convoy apart piece by piece. Didn't even use missiles, just cold, manual railgun fire. Shot until metal cracked and flesh turned to vapor. No survivors, no apologies. We left the wreckage floating as a warning. Didn't even try to retrieve the bodies. We wanted them to see what happened when they fucked with Earth's people. Back at base, there was silence. No one cheered, no one talked about it. Just drinks, blank stares, and enough ghosts in the room to sink the ship. It was around that time we started hearing rumors about something worse, something deeper in the Accord's hierarchy. A project hidden under layers of bureaucracy and encrypted files. Something they didn't want even their own members knowing about. Codename: Vorilia. The whispers came from intercepted comms, fragmented reports from captured scouts. We didn't have details, but we knew it involved Earth, or rather what came after Earth, a contingency plan, insurance. They didn't believe they could beat us anymore, so they planned to erase our lineage, our genes, our culture, our entire existence. Vorilia wasn't a weapon, it was a process, something slow, vile, and clinical, designed to outlive us. It made sense. If they couldn't kill us in war, they'd breed us out, contaminate our DNA with suppressants, re-engineer future generations into something docile, compliant. Evolved. It wouldn't happen overnight. But in 100 years, 200, there'd be no one left to remember Mars, or the fleet, or what it meant to fight like a human. We knew what we had to do, and that meant finding Vorilia before they activated it. The mission wasn't sanctioned. Earth Command didn't even know about it, or if they did, they looked the other way. Ares 9 was built for ghosts, and this job? This was suicide on a goddamn timer. We went dark for 87 hours. No contact, no backup. We slipped past 2 Accord patrol sectors, rode a radiation belt around a dying star, and drifted into a system called Kilaros Zex, dead to most charts, but alive in all the Black Ops traffic we'd seen. If Aurelia existed, it would be there. The planet was nothing but rock and storms. But the satellites, they hummed with energy, not military grade, something cleaner, more controlled. We traced the signal to an underground facility beneath a frozen ocean. Whatever was down there, it had been built to last millennia. Reyes volunteered to go in with me. The rest stayed topside, cloaked, engines dead, weapons charged. We breached the dome at 0300 Earth time. The air inside was sterile, no smell, no sound, just this constant low-frequency hum that made your teeth ache. We moved through halls filled with incubation chambers. Glass tanks filled with humanoid figures suspended in nutrient gel. They looked human, but not quite. Their eyes were wrong. Too smooth, too clean, like nothing had ever caused them pain. We found the core lab, a chamber of glowing data pillars and hybrid AI modules running simulations at God speed. It took 5 minutes to find the mainframe and another 5 to decrypt enough to make me want to throw up. Virelia wasn't just a plan. It was already in motion. They'd collected DNA samples from Earth diplomats, colony refugees, POWs. They were breeding a generation of subhumans, compliant, emotionless, sterile, to replace the real thing. In 5 decades, the Accord would unleash a mass inoculation disguised as humanitarian aid. The serum would sterilize any human who didn't match their new genetic standard. That wasn't just extinction. That was theft of identity. A clean, polite genocide hidden behind scientific progress. Reyes looked at me. I looked at the charges in his hands. We didn't argue. We set the detonators and moved. It wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about making sure they knew that we saw what they were doing, knew that we'd never forgive it. We planted the last charge and were halfway back to the breach point when we ran into them. Accord enforcers. 9 feet tall, exoskeletal armor, energy blades that hummed like wet razors. We didn't run. Reyes covered me while I uploaded the Virelia files to the Ares 9. He took 2 of them down with a shock rifle, screaming for me to move. I turned once, just once, and saw one of those bastards drive a blade through his chest. His last words were calm, steady. Tell him I didn't blink. I made it out. Barely. The explosion ripped through the entire complex, cracked the ice cap, and sent shockwaves across the surface. From orbit, it looked like the planet was bleeding. We didn't wait to watch. We sent the data to Earth Command and moved on. By the time the Accord traced the signature, we were already gone. Ghosts again. Reyes didn't die for revenge. He died for defiance. That's what they could never understand. The galaxy had gotten soft, bloated with comfort and evolution. They forgot that pain sharpens, that hardship forges something harder than steel. They thought tampering with Earth's fleet would get them control. All it got them was extinction, and we weren't done yet. We'd lost planets, families, parts of ourselves we'd never get back. But we still had our rage. And rage was enough. There was no ceremony when we returned to the fleet, no salutes, no welcome back. Just the hiss of docking clamps and the silent glance of soldiers who knew not to ask what we lost this time. Everyone had their own ghosts. Mine had a name. Reyes was the 6th crew member we'd lost in 2 months, and the only one who'd smiled through the entire suicide mission. That man never blinked in a firefight. He didn't flinch when death stood inches away. The kind of man that made you believe the species still had something left to fight for. After Virelia, everything shifted. The upper brass couldn't ignore it anymore. They'd seen the data, the sterilization maps, the genetic engineering timelines. Earth wasn't just being attacked. It was being erased, slow and clinical, and worst of all, quiet. We had to make noise. Commander Brandt, head of Earth's Cold Fleet Division, summoned me within hours of our return. He wasn't a politician. He was old Earth military. Scars on his face, steel in his spine, and a voice that sounded like it had broken someone's jaw just from echoing too loud. He slid the datapad across the war table. "Operation Final Scar," he said. I looked at the file. Coordinates, blueprints, names. One name stood out. Telvac 3, the Accord's Central Archive world. Population? Minimal. But defenses? Maximum. It wasn't a colony or a weapon depot. It was memory. Every civilization they'd integrated had their records stored there. Their culture, history, languages, digitized and cataloged like trophies. Telvac 3 wasn't where they killed people. It's where they killed what they were. We'd destroyed ships. We'd blown up supply chains. But we'd never attacked their soul. Until now. Brandt looked me in the eye and said, "They want to wipe Earth's name from the stars. Let's return the favor." He handed me full operational control. Not a command. A request. I accepted it without a second thought. We went dark again. Ares 9 wasn't alone this time. 2 more stealth cruisers joined us, Gravemind and Vulture's Wish, each manned with volunteers who had lost everything and were ready to write their last chapter in the enemy's language, blood and fire. We spent 5 days drifting in from the outer system, hidden in asteroid shadows, mimicking radiation echoes to avoid detection. Accord satellites were good, but human hate is better. I briefed the teams in silence. No bravado, no speeches, just clear intent. We weren't going to sabotage. We were going to obliterate. The assault began at 0214 Galactic Standard Time. The first blast tore through Telvac's outer defense array. We didn't warn them. We didn't negotiate. We punched a spear through their orbital dome and injected a virus that cracked their firewall in less than 12 seconds. Inside the station, chaos bloomed. Accord workers, the ones who believed they were safe behind thousands of layers of protocol and sensors, panicked. They had never seen Earth's wrath up close, only read about it in contained files labeled hostile anomalies. Now the anomaly had teeth. We stormed the inner archives. No prisoners, no hesitation. Each room we cleared, we torched. Every vault that held our stolen languages, erased. They'd scrubbed dozens of planets from history. We made sure they wouldn't even remember how to pronounce their own names after this. I found a chamber labeled Soul System, category Primitive Transitional. It was filled with holograms of our early settlements, audio clips from Earth news broadcasts, even simulation footage of children from the colonies playing in artificial gravity domes. They studied us like we were animals, controlled variables, rats in a cosmic maze. I threw a thermite charge into the core and walked out. We left Telvac 3 in flames. But we didn't just leave rubble behind. We broadcasted. A message in every Accord tongue, every dialect we'd cracked over the years. The voice was mine, calm and deliberate. This is not retaliation. This is revelation. You've bled us, broken us, tried to erase us, and for that, there will be no more warnings. Every archive you've built will burn. Every culture you consumed will be freed, in ash or truth. You tampered with Earth's fleet. You crossed the line. Now watch your stars go dark. By the time we reached deep space again, Telvac's surface had collapsed. Half the galaxy was listening. The Accord scrambled to issue statements. Terrorist actions. Unprovoked human aggression. Tragic loss of innocent data. They called us violent, unstable, unreasonable, and yet a dozen minor races began defecting overnight. You see, we weren't the only ones they'd sterilized. We weren't the only culture the Accord had scrubbed clean, re-engineered, neutered. There were others, too afraid to fight, too weak to speak, until they saw us do it. The spark lit fire, and fire spreads. Within a month, there were coordinated strikes from resistance groups the Accord had long thought extinct. Guerrilla fleets of forgotten species emerged from nowhere, armed with crude tech, rage, and a new anthem. Earth lives. Some wore our flag. Some painted our messages on their hulls. They didn't want us to lead them. They just wanted someone to show it could be done. But the Accord wouldn't go down without trying to drag us all with them. They launched their final solution. A siege fleet of 200 warships aimed straight at Earth. Not colonies, not Mars or the outer rings, Earth itself. They planned to glass the planet from orbit, salt the soil, detonate tectonic stabilizers, and crash the moon if necessary. Neutralize the root of the disease, they said in their comms. They'd forgotten the rule again. You don't touch Earth's fleet. Not then, not now. Earth Command activated Project Black Net, an emergency defense protocol that had been built in secret beneath the oceans. Autonomous weapon platforms, deep-sea railgun batteries, orbital mines synced to quantum radar pings. The fleet arrived confident. They left scattered. Our AI-controlled systems engaged first. No warning, no messages, just sudden silence as ship after ship blinked out. Those that tried to fire back found their weapons locked, redirected, or overloaded from within. Sabotage codes we'd buried decades ago, planted in peace treaties, backdoors, firmware updates. Even our truce had teeth. And then the Ares 9 returned home. We didn't even need to fire the first shot, but we did anyway. We tore through their rear flank, disabling their command ship and dragging the wreck into Earth's atmosphere. Let it burn like a second sun over the Atlantic, visible from every continent. Humanity stood, bruised, bleeding, but undeniably alive. The Accord sent one final message after that. A plea. Peace talks. Brant didn't respond. Neither did Earth Command. We didn't want peace anymore. We wanted distance, a wall, a void, a line they would never cross again. We didn't just survive extinction. We became the reminder of it. For them, for everyone, the peace offer sat untouched for 3 days. It came wrapped in diplomatic jargon, buried beneath terms like mutual reassessment and strategic recalibration. A last-ditch attempt from an empire that never thought we'd stand this long, let alone bleed them dry. The message was signed by 9 of their top sovereigns, species that once floated above our solar system with smug superiority now trembling behind data walls, hoping the monsters they poked might finally go away. We didn't answer. Earth Command never even bothered decrypting the full message. You don't negotiate with something you've already buried. You don't beg for peace from the ghosts you created. And we were ghosts now. I stood in the observation deck of Ares 9, watching the ruined remnants of the Accord's last siege fleet drift through Earth's orbit like a graveyard. Metal coffins of their finest warships spinning slowly, wires torn loose, hulls split like bones cracked open for marrow. The stars beyond them were quiet, cold, distant. We had bought our silence. Now we had to figure out what to do with it. That's when the real question surfaced, the one none of us wanted to ask. What happens after extinction? See, no one trains you for this part. You fight for survival, for vengeance, for blood. But what do you do when the war you've dedicated your soul to suddenly goes mute? When there's nothing left to destroy? We were never built for peace. Not anymore. I could see it in my crew's eyes, the blank stares, the twitch in their hands like their fingers missed the weight of a trigger, the silence between words, like everyone was waiting for the next body to fall. Even Brant, the old wolf of the cold fleet, looked tired. Like victory had aged him a decade overnight. So he did what men like us always do when the battlefield goes dark. He gave us one more mission. He called it Deep Echo. The idea was simple. Find the origin of the Accord. Not their bureaucracy, not their armies, but what birthed them, the core, the species that started it all, the ideology, the grand unification that turned galaxies into a controlled terrarium. We never met them directly. They were myth, gods behind curtains, whispers in the shadows. But Brant was sure they were real, and he was sure they were still watching. The Accord was a tool, he said, a leash, but someone was holding the other end. So we went dark one last time. Deep Echo took us beyond charted space, beyond any gravitational system known to Earth or even the Accord. We followed fragmented signals left behind in Varelia's core systems, echoes of ancient commands, coordinated pulses that moved faster than light and didn't conform to known physics. It was like chasing ghosts through a black hole. Took us 32 days to find them. They weren't what we expected. The planet had no name, just a void in the database. No light escaped its surface. It didn't even spin, just floated, dead and perfect. Our scanners told us it wasn't a planet at all. It was hollow, a structure the size of a moon, with walls layered in alloys we'd never seen and coding etched into the surface in languages older than light. Brant didn't come with us, said he had to hold Earth together while the fire cooled. But he sent me with his final words burned into my head. Find the source, cut off the hand that holds the leash, and if you can't kill it, make sure it fears us. We breached orbit under blackout conditions. Ares 9 shifted into her deep silence mode. No engines, no active comms, just drifting like a corpse toward the surface. If something watched us, it made no move. We touched down in a crater of obsidian that pulsed with heat signatures but gave off no light. It felt wrong, like the laws of the universe had taken a knee and decided to rest here. Inside, the walls breathed. Not metaphorically, actually breathed. They expanded and contracted like lungs, exhaling data pulses in every direction. We followed the rhythm deeper until we found them. They weren't alive in any human sense. 12 machines, tall, spindly, wrapped in tendrils of energy that flickered like nervous systems. Their faces were smooth, no eyes, no mouths, just hums, not mechanical hums, something older, like the echo of thunder underwater. And they saw us, not with sight, not with sensors. They just knew we were there. The air cracked like static, and one of them stepped forward, speaking directly into our minds. We created balance. You bring noise. I didn't reply. I just stared. This was it, the architects of the Accord, the ones who decided which species rose and which were buried under sand and forgotten. We guided chaos, removed suffering, eliminated deviation. The voice wasn't threatening. It was clinical, like a surgeon explaining a necessary amputation. But I'd seen what their balance looked like. The sterilized colonies, the reprogrammed children, the museums filled with erased civilizations. I stepped forward. I didn't bring a weapon. Didn't need to. You erased life, I said. You sanitized the galaxy, made it clean, made it dead. They didn't deny it. Survival is deviation. Emotion is error. Humanity is virus. Now that got a smile out of me. You finally get it, I said. Then I activated the device Brant had given me. A simple cube. No lights, no buttons. But it held one of the last things the Accord never understood. Unpredictability. It was Earth's final gift to me. A fragment of raw quantum chaos, harvested from a failed experiment on the moon decades ago. Something that defied rules, couldn't be controlled, the very essence of human unpredictability in physical form. I tossed it into the chamber. The machine screamed. Not with sound, with gravity. The floor buckled, the walls twisted. Something inside that planet died that day. We ran. The planet didn't explode. It collapsed, folded inward like it had never existed, leaving only silence in its wake. No debris, no radiation, just absence. We didn't wait to figure out if anything survived. We returned to Earth with one message burned into our systems, the last echo of that machine's scream translated into words. You will regret freeing the noise. But it was too late. The noise was free, and Earth was done hiding. When we returned, we didn't speak. The crew of Ares 9 had seen things no one on Earth had ever imagined. We didn't just find the architects, we erased them. Whatever they were, however they functioned, it didn't matter anymore. They weren't gods, they weren't untouchable. They bled like everything else, even machines, even myths. Brant was waiting when we docked back at Sol's station. He looked thinner, more rigid. There were more lines around his eyes. Command had aged him, and so had the war. But when I handed him the core memory we pulled from the ruins, when I told him that the Accord was leaderless, headless, and twitching on instinct, he didn't smile. He nodded. And said one thing. Now we finish it. The fall of the Accord wasn't loud. It was quiet. That was the worst part. The big battles were over. The fleets were broken. Their forward bases were reduced to ash. Their propaganda networks collapsed as the truth of Virelia and Telvac 3 leaked across the stars. But that didn't mean it was clean. It just got uglier. Like a dying animal lashing out, desperate to stay alive. They stopped coordinating. But they didn't stop killing. Stranded fleets fired on civilian ships. Border worlds became battlegrounds for fanatics trying to hold on to what little power they had left. Some Accord species turned on each other, blaming rival factions for the collapse. The whole galaxy was choking on the smoke of its own burned empire. And in that chaos, Earth moved. We didn't rebuild. We reclaimed. The Cold Fleet was rebranded under one name, the Scorch Doctrine. No more defensive lines, no more drawn-out negotiations. If an Accord world refused to surrender, we glassed it. If an Accord station fired on human vessels, we turned it into dust. But that wasn't the part that scared the galaxy. It was what we didn't destroy that sent ripples through the stars. We began taking territory, not to colonize, not to repopulate, to watch, to control. Entire sectors that once belonged to the Accord were now under human rule, not democracy, not diplomacy, martial oversight, immediate justice, and people feared us for it. Good. Fear meant we didn't have to explain ourselves anymore. I was given command of the Bastion Fleet, 7 ships, one goal, suppress and punish the Accord's remnants wherever they slithered. We didn't issue warnings. We didn't ask for clearance. We operated under one banner, the rule Earth had carved in fire and orbit. Don't touch our fleet. Don't test our memory. There were 3 worlds that made me hate them more than I already did. The first was Karithtu, a once beautiful world turned into a research outpost. The Accord had used it to test cognitive suppression implants on captured humans. We found over 6,000 minds locked in looped simulations, living the same 30 seconds of pain and panic endlessly, their neural pathways kept alive only by voltage. We shut it down. We gave each of them a clean end. No speeches, no heroic last rites. Just mercy they were never offered. The second was Verdos, a hollow asteroid used to grow artificial wombs filled with hybrid gene experiments, human traits spliced with compliant docility, built to serve as future colonial laborers. The clones inside weren't even fully grown. Malformed arms, eyeless faces, fingers twitching in reflexive obedience. We burned it all, not a single second of hesitation. But it was the third that broke me. Station 4 Vega. They called it a cultural re-education dome. When we boarded it, we expected prisons. We expected trauma. We didn't expect mockery. Inside, they'd recreated Earth. Not just cities, memories, warped versions of our past, statues of human leaders with Accord sigils in place of eyes, history books rewritten with phrases like human enlightenment achieved through Accord guidance. They'd turned our pain into propaganda. And they were showing it to other species. A living museum of how to break a race. We didn't destroy it with guns. We hacked their feeds. We broadcasted the truth. Footage from Virelia, Telvac, Kareth, every atrocity. We let the galaxy see. We let them choose. After that, Accord remnants didn't fight us anymore. They ran. But not everyone on Earth was on board with what we were doing. Some called it overreach. A new empire in the making. They whispered about ethics, about restraint, about losing ourselves to the same madness that drove the Accord. I told them the truth. We didn't become monsters. We remembered how to be men. Because men fight, men bleed, men protect, even when the cost is everything, and Earth had paid in full. I still remembered Reyes's last words, still saw the look on Brant's face when the AI network at Telvac collapsed, still felt the echoes of the architects screaming into my skull. This wasn't about peace anymore, or vengeance. It was about presence, about making sure no one, no thing, ever saw Earth as a weakness again. We weren't a planet anymore. We were a warning, a shadow cast across every star system that once laughed at the idea of human sovereignty, a species that bled and burned and refused to die. I was stationed aboard the Harbinger, our newest dreadnought, designed not as a ship of war, but as a symbol. It didn't even have stealth tech. It didn't need it. When the Harbinger entered a system, it meant finality. On one of my last assignments, we were sent to Narsec for a system that had refused to surrender its last Accord enforcers. The planet's surface was beautiful, blue skies, green fields, twin suns hanging low. They thought we'd spare them. They thought wrong. We gave them 12 hours. They used it to evacuate children and medics. Everyone else stayed behind, armed and proud. We leveled it from orbit, not because it was just, but because it was necessary. The galaxy wasn't going to learn through treaties or second chances. It was going to learn by watching us rewrite the rules in smoke and silence. And by the time it realized Earth wasn't asking for peace, it was too late. We had become something else. Not tyrants, not gods, not rebels, just men. And that's what scared them most. Because men remember, and men return fire. No matter how many systems we crushed, how many fleets we shredded, or how many stars dimmed behind us, I couldn't kill the silence in my own head. It followed me. Every time I stepped off the command deck of the Harbinger, that silence clung to my skin like oil. It wasn't guilt, not exactly. I'd long since buried the part of me that cared whether we were right or wrong. Earth had made its decision. We had paid for survival in blood, and no one was handing out medals for restraint. But it was something else. A dull, constant question. What's left of a man after the war he was built for ends? We had become what the galaxy feared. The name human was no longer spoken in mockery. It was whispered with dread. That felt good at first, until I started noticing the cracks. Not in the fleet, in us. The first signs came from the colonies. We'd taken new territory, secured systems, built infrastructure. But the people? They weren't healing. They were hardening. Colonists that had survived Accord reconditioning camps, they didn't trust anyone. Not even Earth Command. They formed their own militias, stockpiled weapons, started talking about independence. Then came the whispers of the dissenters, former officers, ground crews, even war heroes. Men who'd seen too much, who believed we'd gone too far. They didn't fight us directly, But they didn't follow orders either. They walked away, vanished into the deep systems, forming rogue enclaves on planets no one dared claim. Brant tried to play it cool, said it was natural. A soldier with no enemy either finds a cause or invents one. I didn't disagree, I just knew where it led. We were headed for a civil fracture. Not because Earth was weak, but because it had become too strong, too fast. The old lines of command weren't built for this kind of reach. And the longer we held power, the more we started looking like what we'd just destroyed. We said we were doing it to protect our legacy. But legacy was starting to look like a boot. And some of us weren't comfortable wearing it. One day, I got a message that changed everything. Encrypted. No sender ID. Buried in a burst transmission routed through 12 abandoned Accord satellites. It was 3 words. He's still alive. Attached was a data clip. Fuzzy, low-res footage, but it was him. Reyes. The man I watched die on Kalaro 6. The man who screamed, "Tell him I didn't blink," as an energy blade went through his ribs. There he was, walking through an abandoned research dome on Sinter Prime, a wasteland planet, uninhabited since the war, and behind him, dozens of others, former human soldiers, wearing stripped-down fleet armor. No insignias, no flag, just a single phrase scratched into the hull of a shuttle in the background. Earth is not God. I brought it to Brant. He stared at the footage without saying a word for almost 10 minutes. Then, finally, he looked at me and said, "You're not going after him." I didn't argue. I left that night, stole a scout corvette and vanished into deep space. Call it treason. Call it a betrayal. I call it returning to the question I never answered. What happens to men like us after the war ends? It took 3 weeks to track Reyes. He didn't hide, not really. Just moved in the shadows where Earth's sensors didn't shine. The rogue fleet he led was small. No dreadnoughts, no fancy tech. But they were clean, off-grid, organized. And when I finally confronted him, standing in the hollowed shell of a broken Accord satellite, he didn't aim a weapon at me. He smiled. "You figured it out," he said. "Took you long enough." I wanted to yell. I wanted to throw him against a bulkhead and demand how the hell he survived, why he faked his death, why he sent me that message. But all I said was, "Why?" He didn't flinch. "Because we won, and now we're losing something worse than the war." I didn't understand. He led me through the compound, showed me what they were building. It wasn't weapons, it wasn't rebellion, it was memory. Old Earth history, pre-contact education, art, music, language that had been banned by the Accord and forgotten by the fleet. They weren't fighting Earth. They were fighting amnesia. "You think we scare the galaxy because we're powerful?" he said, stopping in front of a wall filled with children's drawings. "No, we scare them because we remember who we are. Pain, rage, grit, stubbornness, that's human, but we're turning into something else, something colder, something mechanical." And then he looked me in the eye. "You've felt it too, that silence, the space where your soul used to be." I didn't argue. He was right. We'd become masters of extinction, but something inside us was dimming. All the chaos we used to define ourselves, it had nowhere to go, no enemy left to feed on, and now we were feeding on each other. Reyes didn't want a war. He wanted a reminder that Earth was more than just fire and fury, that Earth, at its core, was human. He handed me a drive, full of archives, old literature, cultural recordings, philosophical essays, things I hadn't seen since before the war, things that mattered. "Give this to Brant," he said. "He can bury it, or he can rebuild with it." I left without making promises. By the time I returned to Earth space, the political machine had shifted. The Council of Fleet Governors had begun pushing legislation to militarize all outer colonies, not for defense, but to ensure cultural alignment. They used words like unification and future stability. I saw the same playbook the Accord had used 1,000 years ago. Brant met me on the Harbinger. He didn't ask about Reyes, just watched me set the drive down on the table. He stared at it, and then, slowly, pushed it toward the edge, as if about to let it fall. "You want us to teach poetry again while half the galaxy still fears us?" he asked. I met his eyes. "I want us to remember why they feared us in the first place." That stopped him. Because it had never been about the dreadnoughts, not the railguns, not even the fury. It was about will. Earth's strength had always come from one place, its refusal to be redefined by anyone but itself. And now we were doing to others what we swore we'd never let happen to us. Brant didn't destroy the drive. He didn't approve the outer colony doctrine either. He didn't say anything. But over the next few weeks, things began to shift. The Scorch Doctrine was paused. A new branch was created, the Remnant Initiative, focused on cultural reclamation and civilian restoration, not conquest. It wasn't a full reversal. It wasn't an apology. It was a course correction. Earth didn't go soft. We didn't fall into guilt. We just stepped back from the edge. Because we had to. Because if we didn't, then the Accord won after all. Not through war, but by turning us into a mirror. It started with a signal. Not a distress call, not a beacon. Just a single, pulsing burst of code. It didn't match any Accord encryption. Didn't match any human signal either. It was raw, a frequency that didn't belong to machines or biology. Something in between, like static laced with intent. It came from beyond the fringe systems, outside even our darkest maps. The void where the stars thinned out and gravity no longer played by familiar rules. We weren't supposed to receive it. But Earth's fleet had grown paranoid. We'd installed listening stations across the galaxy, passive, hidden, automated. Machines that never slept, never blinked. One of them, buried deep in the ruins of a shattered gas giant called Delta Orion 4, picked it up. Earth Command didn't know what to make of it. The Council debated for 7 days. Some thought it was a leftover Accord failsafe. Others believed it was bait, a trap, something meant to lure Earth's fleet out into uncharted space and cut off its head. But Brant? He didn't wait for consensus. He called me in. By now the man looked like a statue carved out of war. White stubble, heavy eyes, a spine that only straightened when duty demanded it. He handed me the datapad and said, "You took the war to their doorstep. Now you're going to walk past it." I didn't argue. The Harbinger was prepped in silence. No announcement, no ceremonial departure, just a single black flag directive labeled Void Recon, Echo Signal 1. There were only 4 ships in the task force, small, fast, light on weapons but heavy on sensors. We weren't going to conquer. We were going to look. And maybe come back changed. We left the borders of known space after 13 hours in FTL drift, past the outermost Earth beacons, past the last dead Accord station still floating in its own radiation, out into the dark. The first thing we noticed was the cold. Space is cold, sure, but this was different. It was wrong. The kind of wrong that makes your bones ache inside pressure-sealed armor. The Harbinger's climate systems began compensating automatically, reading temperature fluctuations that shouldn't have existed in vacuum. Then the dreams started. Not nightmares, memories. But they weren't mine. Crew reported visions during stasis naps, places they'd never seen, voices they'd never heard, faces that shouldn't have existed in their memory banks. One man, Lieutenant Core, woke up screaming, claiming he'd seen Earth burning. But the sky wasn't ours. The continents were wrong. Another man cut out his own eyes with a spoon, said he was done seeing what sees back. We tried to rationalize it. Void psychosis, radiation-triggered brain activity. But I knew better. We weren't hallucinating. We were being touched. On the 12th day, we found it, a structure floating in the void. It wasn't a ship, and it wasn't dead. It pulsed. It was shaped like nothing we'd ever seen, jagged, asymmetrical, like something grown instead of built. It stretched for kilometers in every direction, with spires that pierced nothingness and twisted like bone under strain. No signs of life, no energy emissions. But we could feel it watching. We sent a drone first. It never came back. Not destroyed, just gone. No explosion, no feedback, just silence where data should have returned, like it had been unwritten. I authorized boarding, not out of bravery, out of necessity. You don't leave something like that behind. Not in a universe where secrets rot into threats. If the Accord had found this place, maybe that's why they became what they did. Maybe they weren't trying to control the galaxy. Maybe they were hiding from something worse. We touched down inside the structure with 2 squads, 6 men in total, armored, armed, ready for anything. We weren't ready for nothing. No walls, no gravity, no floor. Just endless black that pulsed when you stepped, like walking on a living nerve. Our suits read pressure, atmosphere, even warmth, but no source. Every sensor said we were inside a living system, but there were no organs, no heart, just whispers. They didn't come through the air. They came through us. A voice that didn't speak. It invaded, pressed against your skull until your thoughts stopped being yours. You burn to remember. I spun, rifle raised. Nothing. The others heard it too. Some fell to their knees. One man, Dietz, started screaming, not in pain, not in terror, in joy, like something beautiful had finally come for him. He ran into the black and disappeared. No trace. We moved deeper. At some point, I lost track of distance. My helmet stopped feeding coordinates. I didn't even know which direction was up anymore, but I kept moving. Some part of me needed to see the core. And I did. It wasn't a machine. It was a mind. Suspended in the dark, stitched from thought and metal and memory. It looked human at first, the shape of a man, hanging in nothing, arms stretched wide like crucifixion, but it wasn't flesh. It wasn't real. It was a representation, a way for my brain to see something it wasn't supposed to comprehend. And it knew me. You survived extinction. I didn't speak. My voice caught in my throat like a stone. You carry the seed. My suit glitched, static across the HUD. My heart rate tripled. And then I saw it. Visions, a world beyond Earth, not a planet, a source, where something ancient had buried a weapon, not a cannon, not a fleet, a species, human-like, but older, angrier, sent to spread, sent to infect us. We were never an accident. We were a containment breach. Earth hadn't evolved to survive the universe. We'd been designed to destroy it. The Accord wasn't afraid of us because we were violent. They were afraid because we were a trigger. The entity pulsed again, brighter now. I felt it peeling something away inside me. Not memory, but meaning. Stripping away the parts of me that made me human, until I stood there, bare and trembling. And it saw everything. Then it said one final thing. The other seeds are awakening. And then I woke up. Back on the Harbinger, alone, 2 weeks missing. The boarding teams, gone. No records, no footage, just me. And a message in my armor's core memory. You've seen it. Now choose. I didn't speak to anyone on the way home. Not Brant, not Earth Command, not the Remnant. I gave them my report, scrubbed, redacted, sterilized. But I kept the real memory for myself, because I knew the truth now. We weren't the end of the war, we were the beginning of something worse. And whatever we thought we were fighting against, it wasn't the Accord, it wasn't machines, and it wasn't tyranny, it was us. There's a moment after you've seen something that can't be explained where everything else feels artificial. That's what it was like coming back to Earth. The blue looked too clean, the oceans too still, the cities lit up like nothing had ever been broken. You walk through the command halls and see officers nod in respect, techs in crisp uniforms, fleets hanging in low orbit like gods on leashes. And all I could think was, none of them know. They still believed we were the end result, the sharpened product of war, of trauma, of resistance. But they hadn't seen the shape in the void. They hadn't stood face to face with the thing that wore a human face to speak to me. They didn't hear what it whispered, not in words, but in acceptance. You are the seed. Not a seed. I kept it buried as long as I could. Brant didn't push. He knew something had shifted in me, but his eyes had grown tired too. We were both men trying to lead in a world built on ashes. The war was technically over. The Accord remnants scattered, the fringe systems slowly stabilizing under Earth's heavy shadow. But something in the stars had started to shift. It began with dreams. Not just mine. Entire battalions started reporting synchronized nightmares, visions of burning soil, bleeding skies, towers that bled light and collapsed into screams, planets that cracked open not from bombs, but from birth. They were waking up, other seeds, other human variants across unknown systems, forgotten long ago, left behind, discarded, buried, some abandoned by pre-Accord civilizations that had tried to control them, others sealed on purpose. The Harbinger wasn't just our ship anymore. It became the center of a new branch, Echo Command, built to investigate anomalies, trace signals, and contain anything related to this growing infection. Because that's what we were now. A spreading virus of memory, violence, and unchecked will. I led the first operation. Codenamed Grave Star, a rogue planet orbiting a dead pulsar, reported to contain strange architecture and biosigns matching early Terran DNA. We found a settlement, human, but not Earth human. Bigger, denser muscle tissue, slower speech patterns, but smarter. They lived underground, protected from radiation, their walls etched with stories, battles, gods, gates. Some of the carvings showed Earth, not the modern version. Ancient Earth, before satellites, before cities. They called it the origin scar. They said they were left behind to sleep until the others returned. They said the furnace of seeds would ignite soon. We ran tests. Their DNA matched 92% with baseline humans. But the rest? Unknown. Older, stronger, primordial. Brant ordered immediate containment. The Council panicked. Within weeks, Gravestar's settlement was quarantined, disappeared off maps. But whispers spread. That's when the remnant started pushing back. Reyes came out of hiding. He hijacked an Earth broadcast satellite and aired 5 minutes of footage across the galaxy, showing the sealed settlement, the captured children, the test chambers being prepped by Earth's new science division. He didn't scream. He didn't threaten. He just said one thing. Earth promised never to become the Accord. Now we bury anything that doesn't fit. Is this the legacy we burned a galaxy for? It split us in two. Earth's population, already fractured from years of war, loss, fear, began to question everything. The outer colonies demanded oversight. Civilian leaders threatened rebellion. Brant enforced martial law in 2 fringe systems before the panic could spread. But the truth couldn't be contained anymore, because the stars had started to echo. The void was speaking, and other species began to hear it, too. Former Accord races, once docile, once obedient, began developing symptoms: violence, memory overlap, rage without trigger, as if something deep inside them had shifted. The Galactic Council, what was left of it, summoned Earth for explanation. Brant refused. He sent a fleet instead. Message received. The final line was being drawn. Earth stood on one side, armed, fractured, paranoid. The rest of the galaxy stood on the other, wounded, scattered, but terrified of what they might become. And in the middle? Me. I left the Harbinger, left Echo Command, left everything. I went rogue. I didn't do it for Reyes, I didn't do it for Brant. I did it because the whisper never stopped. Even now, it calls, telling me there's something still coming. Not war, not peace. Something inevitable. I tracked the source to a planet beyond the burned systems, a dead rock orbiting an ancient red dwarf. No signals, no life, just me, a man with too many ghosts and a choice he didn't know how to make. I found the cave after 3 days in hostile wind. Inside, buried beneath meters of ancient stone, was a single monolith. Not Accord tech, not Earth tech. Older, etched with a language I couldn't read but somehow understood. It said, "You were not made to rule. You were made to remind, and when the stars forget, you burn them awake." I stood there for hours, reading the words again and again. We weren't meant to build empires. We were meant to be a warning, a fail-safe, a spark, the reminder that willpower, unyielding, imperfect, raw, matters, even when it destroys everything around it. That was our purpose. Not to conquer, but to show what happens when you try to control the uncontrollable. The Accord forgot. So we burned them. Now Earth forgets, and we are burning ourselves. I left the cave with no clarity, just truth. I didn't go back to Brant, didn't return to Reyes, didn't rejoin any fleet. I drift, I watch. I listen to the systems that flicker and cry for order. But I won't be a tool anymore. Because the seed has bloomed. It's everywhere now. And when the stars forget what it means to bleed for identity, to suffer for the right to stand alone, the fire will come again. Not from Earth, from within. The last transmission I sent to both Brant and Reyes was short. Just a quote from the monolith. "Do not tame the fire, do not worship the fire, be the fire, or be forgotten." No one responded. They don't have to. They've already made their choices. Now the galaxy will make its own. Because Earth was never the enemy. We were the reminder. And reminders don't ask permission. They arrive, and they burn.